At a family dinner, my sister-in-law said my husband deserved someone better. When I confronted her, she called it a joke and said I was too sensitive. I've always believed that family should be a place of love, support, and respect. When I married my husband, I was excited to become part of his family, hoping for strong, warm relationships. My husband and I have been together for several years, and while no marriage is perfect, we love and respect each other deeply. However, I've always felt that my sister-in-law, Emma, has never truly accepted me. From the beginning, she's made subtle, passive-aggressive remarks, little digs about my career, my background, and even the way I run my household. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe I was imagining things or that she was just a blunt person. But one evening, at a family dinner, she crossed a line I could no longer ignore. It was supposed to be a pleasant evening. My husband's parents had invited us all over for dinner, a gathering we attended regularly. His parents are warm, welcoming people who have always treated me kindly, and I was looking forward to catching up with them. Emma was there too, along with her husband, and as usual, she took center stage in the conversation. Everything seemed fine at first. We talked about work, upcoming vacations, and the latest family updates. The mood was lighthearted. That changed, however, when the conversation shifted to relationships. Someone mentioned a mutual friend who had recently gotten engaged, and Emma casually remarked on how important it was to find the right match. Then, with a smirk on her face, she said, "Some people just settle, though. Like my brother. He could have done so much better." At first, I wasn't sure I'd heard her correctly. The room fell into an awkward silence as my heart started pounding. I looked at my husband, hoping he would immediately shut her down, but he just looked caught off guard. His parents looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. I forced a laugh, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice measured. Emma shrugged. "Oh, come on, it's just the truth. No offense, but I always pictured him with someone a little different. You know, someone who matches his energy more." I felt my stomach twist. The message was clear. She didn't think I was good enough for her brother. I could feel everyone waiting for my reaction, but the way Emma was grinning made it obvious that she thought this was funny. That she expected me to either laugh it off or sit there and take it. I glanced at my husband again, but he still looked uncomfortable rather than outraged. My father-in-law cleared his throat and changed the subject, steering the conversation towards something trivial, but the damage was done. My face was hot, my appetite gone. I forced myself to get through the rest of the meal, but all I could think about was how deeply humiliating it felt to have my worth questioned so openly in front of my husband and his family. This wasn't the first time Emma had said something rude, but this time was different. This time, she made sure everyone heard it. This time, she made sure I knew exactly how she felt about me. Dinner continued, but I barely participated in the conversation. Every time Emma laughed or chatted like nothing had happened, my irritation grew. She was acting as if she hadn't just insulted me in front of the entire family. And the worst part? No one had stood up for me. My husband hadn't spoken up, my in-laws had looked uncomfortable but stayed silent, and the conversation had simply moved on like nothing happened. By the time dessert was served, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this slide. Emma had insulted me in my presence, in my husband's presence, and in the presence of his entire family. And the worst part? No one had stood up for me. I knew I couldn't control their reactions, but I could control mine. I wasn't going to let her get away with pretending this was just a joke. As we got ready to leave, I pulled Emma aside, determined to confront her about what she had said. What happened next only made things worse. As we were getting ready to leave, I knew I couldn't just walk away without addressing what had happened. Emma had humiliated me in front of the entire family, and if I let it slide, she would take it as permission to do it again. My heart was pounding, but I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and pulled her aside as she was grabbing her coat. "Emma," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Can we talk for a minute?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Sure," she said, crossing her arms. I wasted no time. What you said at dinner about my husband settling, it was completely out of line. I don't know why you think it's okay to say something like that to me, but I need you to understand that it's not. Emma blinked, then let out a small laugh. Oh my God, are you seriously upset about that? She rolled her eyes. It was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. I felt my hands clench into fists, but I forced myself to stay composed. A joke, I repeated. You publicly question my worth as a partner in front of your entire family. That's not a joke, Emma. That's just mean. She sighed dramatically, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Look, I wasn't trying to insult you. I was just saying that my brother has always been a catch. It's not a crime to think he could have ended up with someone different. Different. There it was again. That word. She didn't just mean someone different, she meant someone better. Someone she approved of. I took a deep breath. Do you even hear yourself? You're implying that I'm not good enough for him. That he could have done better than marrying me. That's not just an opinion, Emma. That's cruel. Emma scoffed, shaking her head like she couldn't believe I was making a big deal out of this. You're being way too sensitive about this. I was just teasing. I stared at her, trying to understand how someone could be so dismissive, so incapable of even considering that what they said might have been genuinely hurtful. But that's when it hit me, she knew exactly what she was doing. Emma wasn't clueless or accidentally rude. She was intentional. And she wasn't sorry. Before I could respond, my husband walked up, sensing the tension. Everything okay here? He asked, looking between us. Emma smirked and shrugged. Your wife's upset because I made a harmless joke. Apparently, I'm not allowed to have an opinion anymore. I turned to him, waiting to see how he'd react. This was his moment to stand up for me, to acknowledge that what his sister said was wrong, to support me. But instead, he sighed. Emma, come on, he said tiredly. Maybe just be a little more careful with what you say. That was it. That was all he had to say. No anger, no real defense. Just a half-hearted attempt to smooth things over without actually taking a side. I felt a sinking weight in my chest. Emma smirked again, like she had won. Fine, fine, she said dismissively. I'll be more careful next time. Happy now? I wasn't. Not even a little. But I knew there was no point in dragging it out. Emma wasn't going to apologize because she didn't think she had done anything wrong. And my husband wasn't going to push back against her because he never had before. I turned away, my frustration boiling under the surface, and said nothing as we walked out the door. The car ride home was quiet. My husband kept glancing at me, clearly aware that I was upset, but he didn't say anything at first. I stared out the window, trying to collect my thoughts, but the silence between us only made my frustration grow. Finally, he sighed. Are we really going to let this ruin the night? I turned to him, my eyes burning. Are we ruining the night? Or did your sister do that when she said, in front of your whole family, that you deserved someone better than me? He ran a hand through his hair. Babe, you know how she is. She says things without thinking. She doesn't mean half of what she says. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh, she meant it. She made sure I heard it loud and clear. And the worst part? No one, not you, not your parents, said a damn thing. He exhaled, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. I just didn't want to make a big scene at dinner. I shook my head in disbelief. So you'd rather let me sit there and be humiliated than stand up to your sister? Do you realize how that makes me feel? He didn't answer right away. I pressed on. Do you think I'm overreacting? He hesitated. That hesitation stung more than I could have imagined. I think, he sighed again. I just think it's not worth getting this upset over. She's my sister. I don't want drama between you two. I felt my stomach twist. You don't want drama? What about respect? What about making sure your wife doesn't feel belittled by your own family? His grip on the wheel tightened. It's just the way she is, he said again, as if that excused everything. And in that moment, I realized something painful. This wasn't just an Emma problem. It was a him problem, too. Emma could say whatever she wanted because she knew she could get away with it. Because she knew no one would call her out. Because my husband, my own partner, the one person who should have had my back no matter what, would always choose the path of least resistance instead. That realization sat heavy in my chest as we pulled into our driveway. I got out of the car without another word, walking into the house as he followed behind me in silence. I didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain: I wasn't going to keep quiet about this. This wasn't over. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed replaying the dinner, the confrontation, the car ride, every moment that left me feeling smaller, angrier, and more alone. My husband had chosen peace over standing up for me. And Emma? She knew she could keep pushing boundaries because no one would stop her. By morning, I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let this slide. At breakfast, my husband acted like nothing had happened. I waited for him to bring it up, to acknowledge how I felt, but he didn't. So I did. "I need to talk about last night," I said, setting down my coffee. He sighed, already looking exhausted. "Babe, I really don't want to drag this out." My jaw tightened. "Of course you don't. It's easier for you to move on because you weren't the one being humiliated in front of your family." His expression hardened. "I get that Emma was out of line, but I don't want to start a war with my sister over one comment." One comment. I let out a dry laugh. "This isn't about one comment. It's about respect. And the fact that your silence told her that what she did was okay." He rubbed his temples. "What do you want me to do? Confront her? Demand an apology?" "I want you to have my back," I said, my voice steady. "I want to know that if someone disrespects me, especially in your own family, you won't just sit there and let it happen." He looked away, and that silence was my answer. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "So that's it?" I asked. "You'll just keep letting her treat me like this?" His shoulders tensed. "She's my sister." I nodded slowly. "And I'm your wife." The weight of those words lingered between us. He knew what I meant. And so did I. I wasn't going to beg for the bare minimum. I stood up, grabbing my keys. "I need some air." "Where are you going?" he asked. I looked at him, at the man who promised to love and protect me, but couldn't even stand up to his sister. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I need to figure out if I can keep living like this." I walked out, leaving him sitting there in silence. And for the first time in a long time, I finally felt like I was standing up for myself.